Welcome to the Falling Walls Plenary Table, translating science into medical application.
Hello there. I'm Mariette DiChristina. I'm the Dean of the Boston University College of Communication. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to our opening plenary session. At the Falling Walls Circle, as you've heard, global leaders in research, business, and policymaking and media will exchange ideas and discuss solutions for today's most pressing issues in science and technology. And we're in for a rare treat from our experts who'll be joining us shortly. This meeting's discussion, as you've heard, is translating science into medical applications. And from our experts today, we're going to learn about how to improve global health through the latest research. This panel will start with an opening statement or question that each of the panelists will respond to very quickly. And then we'll have an open discussion at the panel stage for 30 minutes. And then we'll have about 10 minutes for questions from the physical audience here and from our virtual audience. I hope you will feel free, please, to share questions, and Adam will help me moderate that one. So now I'd like to welcome to the stage, and I'll stay here so you folks can walk past me, our speakers today. Emmanuelle Charpentier, who is director of the Max Planck Unit for the Science of Pathogens and a Nobel Prize winner. Please come ahead. Christoph Huber, member of the Supervisory Board of BioNTech SE. Maria Leptin, who is the new president of the European Research Council. Well, congratulations as well, Maria. Oscar-Werner Reif, who's CTO of Sartorius Stettin Biotech GmbH. Uğur, Şahin, CEO of BioNTech SE. You've all done your thinking, put on your thinking caps and homework, and we're going to kick off with our initial question. And I hope you don't mind, just to make it easy, why don't we go in this direction, starting with you, if that's all right. So the prompt was, which medical innovation of the last 25 years has the greatest potential to innovate medicine, and why? Quick answers, please. Over to you.
Well, rather simplistic. I did choose gene technology, gene therapy, simply based on the fact that the disease is cured or attacked in that point where it's, as a matter of fact, the source is coming from, the basis is coming from. And it has the biggest potential also when it comes to the industrialization, because the cost effect on the health systems, once successful, would be tremendous. Of course, some pharmaceutical companies might not like that one, but just the manufacturing costs will be rather low if you look at the basis. And the second point is also when it comes to the longer lasting effect, and I keep here the ethical point out, completely out, because there are ethical questions which we have to address, but nevertheless, the long-term lasting effect for each of the patients might be tremendous. And I talk here about the potential, not the reality. And that was the question.
Thank you so much.
I will say the same, but I'm a bit biased, for sure. I will mention gene technologies, because it goes beyond applications in medicine, and it's also with regard to gene technologies that are also used and developed further for basic science that leads to better ways to find new mechanisms that lead to the discovery of new targets for medicine, and also new models to study clinical settings. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Would you like to put us on a different path, or will you also agree with gene therapy?
Well, actually, I have my own bias.
Very good.
Since almost 50 years, prior to really first effects on me, and then to influence
Thank you.
Well, I obviously thought that at this table I would not have to mention genome editing, CRISPR, nor RNA vaccines, because there are enough people around the table who mentioned that, but they belong right up there. In fact, what I said was, I quoted Niels Bohr, it's hard to make predictions, especially if they're about the future. And of course, we don't know yet. We know about these wonderful discoveries, that what they're doing. And for all we know, the real breakthrough might be being discovered somewhere right now that we don't even know about. Now, about the things we know about, what hasn't been mentioned is infectious diseases. And I would put mechanisms like gene drive right up there that might help, in one fell swoop, cure many, many people that don't even have access to things like personalized medicine yet. I would also put aspects of personalized medicine there, which both CRISPR and RNA vaccines actually need to work. The immunization against cancer is, it wouldn't work without the personalized medicine and with all the other things we've heard about. I could go on forever, and I find it very hard to rank these. They deal with very different things, and we haven't even talked about diagnosis yet, AI, imaging, etc. What a fun topic.
Yeah, I would agree with every suggestion made, and I believe that innovations really happen in the interface of technology revolutions, and so the biggest challenge is to combine innovations, okay? Disruptive innovations like AI, like CRISPR-Cas, like new gene therapy technologies, and in this regard, messenger RNA could be a wonderful connector. Messenger RNA allows us to deliver information to our body cells, and this information can be, of course, CRISPR-Cas. It could be any type of gene therapy. It could be a vaccine. It could be a personalized treatment. And the second aspect is the scale of production allows us to democratize access to health and medicine, also to regions which can't afford nowadays treatments. And therefore, I believe mRNA has the potential, if combined with everything here already mentioned, to be disruptive.
Thank you.
And for sure, CRISPR, it's RNA-based therapies. So when we say gene therapies, it's gene and RNA therapies.
It's good you add that because, of course, these are terms that we hear a lot in society, but not everybody knows how well they're connected, certainly not as well as the experts around the table. So we've heard about gene therapies, immunotherapy, CRISPR, gene drives, personalized medicines, diagnosis, AI, imaging, which would be interesting to come back to, innovations happening in the interface. I loved your point about something could be happening right now, and we don't know. And mRNA, was certainly grateful for all our vaccines there. I'd like to dive just a little bit deeper into the underpinnings of all of these. How important is basic research, say in chemistry, physics, biology, to driving these medical innovations? Would you like to start, maybe?
This is the basis of every research. Without what we can advance.
Yes. I'm happy you say we all know that. That should be shouted loud and clear. I, of course, represent here the basic research. That's what the ERC does. And I think it has to be said over and over again. I do not believe that everybody knows that. And, I don't know whether everybody knows that you discovered, your big discovery was based on absolute basic science. I think it's been repeated more often about the things that form the basis for the vaccines. But that's why I said what's being discovered right now, we don't know. And people should be allowed to muck around with bacteria and animals in yogurt and should study strange modifications of RNA. You're right, people don't know what it means. But that's fine, and they should trust the best minds who are working on things that sound possibly useless. It's necessary, and one day, you said connecting. I think that is extremely important. Connecting different findings, and you don't know what you'll need to connect. So here's a plea for basic science, and I wish it was true that everybody knew.
I think it's a plea for basic science and also for human curiosity and ingenuity, which remains really key and important.
That's another whole ballpark, doing things that actually, following curiosity about things that may never help man. Black holes don't.
I'm sure Einstein had no idea we'd be using GPS in our phones when he was working on relativity. So just building on this a bit, and I'd like to hear from industry here as well as from others. How do we best fund that basic research if it's going to take decades, if we don't know that eventually we might be able to apply it to our health and well-being? How do we make sure that society has the understanding that it needs time, and even if it might look like it won't, but how did you say that it might possibly be useless?
I feared that one, that you look at the industry on me here. Because in the end, we make our business on the basic research. Let's be clearly honest, because we collect what the research is doing and try to industrialize it and make a business out of it at some point. So we have, in the end, I guess, the biggest advantage here. Overall, there are different examples out there in the world with quite successful principles. I think Germany is not that bad. Otherwise, BioNTech, as an example, wouldn't exist, coming out of a research field. But you can also go to the US, to Israel, where you have different systems of public-private funding. And I think here the potential to have a closer connection between the research where industry is interested, so applied research, and the fundamental research can be done better. Because one point is, I think, what you said before, the fate of basic research is that it's so early, very often so strange, that people don't understand it, and what people don't understand, they fear. And I guess to get at a very early stage into the range of something applied, which is relevant for people, is quite essential for the success of the technology. So I think using, particularly in Germany, more tools of public-private funding and very early stage access of basic research into applied research and then early stage technologies to users will help the translation of basic research into industrial environment. There is something, for example, the state of Israel with the Technion or Weizmann Institute are by far more driven and better organized.
Thank you. Other comments?
Yeah, maybe the only comment is the definition of basic research. So I like really the quote of Pasteur, who says there is no basic or applied research, there is research and there are applications. And we have really to understand that research never ends. There is research which starts without purpose. Then during the trying to apply something, you understand that you need to understand mechanism. It goes back to mechanistic research, and it's a continued process. So what we need to avoid is that we provide some sort of a gap between basic and what is called applied research. All is research, and the question is, how can we connect the interfaces and get a better understanding?
There's actually a really nice example for that. Remember when Reagan declared the war on cancer?
Yes.
When was that? We still haven't cured cancer, but the irony is that all the money that was poured into research when he wanted to cure cancer led to so many discoveries in basic biology, all the intracellular signaling, all the oncogenes that were found. They tell us something about basic biology. So I agree entirely with you that it's completely fluid. And of course, Uğur has an ERC grant. So there you go. Very basic, right next to application.
Thank you. Emmanuelle, I'd like to turn to you for this one, just sort of rounding on the basic research and supporting it. How do we find and support researchers who can stick with it over time? You know, we have some funding, but how do we best identify the folks we'll need to take us forward with these questions of curiosity to application?
Oh, it's a difficult subject, specifically nowadays with a new generation. I mean, basic science is all about being extremely perseverant.
Yes.
It's actually there is a high level of frustration, I believe, and I think it is important to convey this message to the new generation: is that being a scientist is a constant fight, I believe, in the system. But it's a joy as well, at least from my side. But I think it's a challenge to prepare the upcoming generation to really, to encourage them to pursue the path of basic science. Now, I would like to come back to what was said. I'm from the Pasteur school, right? I believe that basic scientists should remain basic scientists unless they choose to jump on the other board of applied science. However, I think it is critical, and this is what I learned very early on, is to remain, doing basic science, but always have an eye and understanding of the potential of the basic science that we are doing. And this is what may make the difference. Now, having said this, in my case, what made the difference in terms of applications was also having moved around quite a bit, and also having been very early on at the level of my postdoctoral time in the US, confronted to the world of biotech and industry. So being aware of this world, knowing people, and this makes also the difference. Often the people are isolated. That is, I think, the issue that we are observing, and this is maybe the reason for the success of Boston, is to have been able to put an environment that is extremely successful with basic scientists, clinicians, biotech and industry people who know one another and can work with one another. And I think this kind of ecosystems we are not really developed that well in Europe. And at least because we're in Europe, my fear is that we don't see enough developments in this direction where we are. And let's face it, all the investors always at some point move the biotech companies to the US if they want to see a certain success. And this, I think, it is a huge issue.
Those are wise observations, I think. Humans like to learn in community and create in community as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to change topics a bit just because we, as the time spins down on us, I could obviously talk to all of you all day. Christoph, maybe we could begin with you for this one. What can we do to begin to shorten the time it may take? So I believe passionately in the power of research, basic or otherwise, but to point up to applications as soon as possible was a good point as well. What are some ways we could potentially shorten that development time to get from basic research to applied?
This is a question which really should be addressed to Uğur.
Oh, okay, you're passing it. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, I think we have to really understand that that in the last 30 years we have a transformation in science, biotechnology, and medicine, where the technology can really deliver. Yeah? And we now come in a situation that the classical way of drug development, where you go through different phases, is not anymore appropriate. We have to reconsider how drug development is done, yeah? And reinvent drug development in a way that we can be faster. Yeah? So I remember my PhD time where I was working day and night, also on the weekends. Yeah? And in the drug development, we are stopping to work on Friday afternoon. Yeah, and I think we can implement research really to connect that. We did that for the vaccine development. We worked 24/7. Without that, people needed to work much longer. It was just working in shifts. Yeah, and we worked together with regulators who usually respond to our questions months later. Yeah, they were responding much quicker. Yeah, within a few days. Yeah? So all these learnings allowing us to make a vaccine in less than 1 year. We can ask the question, why can't we do that also for other type of medicines where the technology is already mature? Yeah? And we just try to reduce the waiting times. And what is also important is all the bureaucracy around drug development. We have really to ask whether the bureaucracy helps us, yeah, or really limits the progress. Yeah? So it is not a finger-pointing question. It's just a question to realize the chances and the potential of technologies that could be, and drug development that could be much faster than it was 30 years ago.
I'm just looking if anybody wants to add.
Yeah, there are several items to that one. I mean, with the funding, that is also pretty much a comment. I mean, it starts very early. If I do the funding, yes, money is great, but if you distribute the money across everywhere, then it trickles down a path where it has no effect. So a focus on the funding helps. So work big, fail big if you fail, but invest sufficiently into the research to speed it up. Otherwise, I think it stays slow. And particularly in the field of pharmaceuticals, the question here is we have to bring together the development, the different trends to convince then also regulators to take a more risk-based approach. If you take the data available today and use modern state-of-the-art data analytical tools to support the evidence of the therapy, you have already reduced the risk for the regulators to make a fact-based decision. So here I would say the data analytics, AI, machine deep learning supports that. And the second part is the transparency of the research at an early stage helps a lot to explain that. Also to reduce this fear and risk base. I mean, we discussed it early on outside a decade ago when you came with gene therapy or you modify something in the human body by mRNA. People feared there was a distinct avoidance of that field. Today, it's considered saving the world. Great. So you also need to find that trigger point where the acceptance in the society comes up, and then you need a field where you can industrialize it. So the infrastructure to industrialize it must be there. Otherwise, it moves out. So if you have the funding right, you combine the right tools, think in a risk-based approach, helping the regulatories, and have an industrial network around it. That is success, not a single item that would speed it up.
Systems thinking, of course, being very important with multidisciplinary problems that are complex, right? So just a few others, if we could, while we're speeding up research and being very mindful of, you just mentioned people used to be afraid of mRNA, and now we look at it as a savior. And indeed, we've seen a lot of fear around the world, around new advances. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit, as we are thinking about ways to advance research so that we can bring the innovations from the lab to supporting human life and well-being, how do we work to support trust in those people? Because people are worried about new things, and they, we're trying to speed drug development, but if we bring the drugs to them and they're not willing to take them, or the vaccines, coming from the US, how do we effectively then counteract that sort of conspiracy thinking mindset? Any thoughts on that? Please. And then I'll go to you, Emmanuelle.
I think we all think about that.
Yeah.
The recognition and perception of the power of science-driven innovation to solve problems. And that requires more than we have. It definitely requires to kind of focus on school education. We have these wonderful stories to tell about the heroes, about Louis Pasteur, Robert Koch. What a wonderful, positive thing to talk about to very perceptive young people. So this is one component. Another component, as we know, there is a deficiency of financing print media. And they do have problems to recruit specialized journalists, and. And as a consequence, the facts are not optimally communicated. And as a consequence, politicians sometimes are lost by this terrible noise and confusion in the internet and in the mass media. So this is one focus, and it must be understood.
Thank you. Would you like to add to that?
Yes, so I totally agree with what was said. And I believe with regard to the vaccine against SARS-CoV-2, for sure there is always an overreaction based on a pandemic that evolved extremely fast. But I think it's a problem of communication. I believe the people never ask themselves the molecular basis of the vaccines they have how do you say, already taken, so, and they don't neither ask themselves so many questions about the molecular basis of the multiple pills they are also taking on a daily basis. So I think it's a question of communication.
But it's, I mean, it's communication, but where do you start? You know, it's not unique to the vaccination now. That is, of course, an extreme and highly visible case. We have the same for genetically modified plants and agriculture, which really can feed the world. And there's opposition to that, and complete misunderstanding of the potential risks. At the same time, people smoke and fly on airplanes and subject themselves to, to cosmic radiation, which is far more dangerous than anything you guys are doing, or the agrochemistry is doing. It has to, but it's not even restricted to science. Of course, in politics too, people do not understand risks. People do not know how to judge whether facts are right or wrong, and I think it's a huge problem for education. Of course, it's education, but how do you start? How do you reach the people in the first place? I think it's a completely intractable and really scary problem. No answers.
There's another element, obviously, which is within, in particular, European universities, the kind of acknowledging the translational part of. And that requires to establish a culture. And to establish a culture, that takes time. The US are much ahead of Europe, in spite of the presence of numerous brains and bravery and passion and content. So I think Europe will learn how to accomplish and will challenge the other side much, much more, as we see right now.
No,
Already.
I totally agree. This is a huge issue still in the education in Europe. this idea that is conveyed to the scientists that if the young scientists, that if one day they leave academia to go to biotech and industry, it will be considered as a failure, as the top managers and the top scientists in biotechs and industries are most likely the best scientists or the most interesting personalities, at least personally I have met. So I think this is really important to convey the fact that one can have a great career in biotech and industry and have even a greater impact.
I would love to see that as a person from a college of communication at Boston University. So I'd like to fit in one last topic. We have a couple more minutes before we'll turn to questions from the audiences online and here, which is, we live in a globalized world. However, it's also a very globally unjust society. So how do we make sure that the medical innovations benefit the world more equitably? Do you have some thoughts you might like to share on that?
Maybe I can start here. So for us, as a company, we are in a special situation that we were so successful with our first product, with a new technology, and we know that this new technology can be applied to many diseases. And the question is, what is really the best path to make this technology available to regions which deserve better medical health, like Africa. And we believe the best way is really to enable transfer of the technology, and enable to build manufacturing capacities. For example, in Africa, we are doing that. We have started now project with Senegal and Rwanda to transfer our technology, to build manufacturing space, to connect to the people. According to the idea, if you feed a man with a fish, then he will not be able to continue. But if you show him how to do fishing, then he will be able to help himself. And that's what we need to do at the end of the day, to make technologies and know-how available, and connect that to the classical ways how industry works. Provide people some sort of benefits to apply the technology, to distribute vaccines, to produce there. And so it will take years. But we believe that this is the most sustainable way to build innovation, where so that people and regions can serve for themselves.
Thank you. That's fantastic. We have 30 seconds if anybody wants a last comment on, I like the idea of teach a man to fish and work with co-collaborating and co-creating approaches, especially in developing nations. Any other quick comment?
Well, for your direct question, I think the only way is to bring the manufacturing costs down and to increase the success rate of developing a pharmaceutical drug. I mean, if you look at the car industry or whatever, the pharmaceutical industry is here decades behind, because if only one target out of 100,000 make it to the market, you have problem number one. And if the manufacturing costs, and this is where we are playing as well, is still tremendously high, then you can ship the production wherever you want. The basic costs remain high, and therefore on these two items must be seriously worked on, otherwise the situation will not change.
Good, thank you. So I understand Adam has some questions from the audience.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Adam Levy. Is my microphone on yet?
Yeah, there you are.
Yes, there we go. Okay, great. So I'm Adam Levy, science journalist and science communicator. Throughout the day, we're going to be taking questions from our audience here, as well as from our online audience. But first, I'd like to ask the audience here to raise their hand if they have any questions for this fantastic start to the day. Yeah, we've got one right here to begin with. Let's just wait for this microphone.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here in the same room with us. It's really exciting to have you.
Let's just wait 1 second for the microphone to turn on.
Can I? Okay. My name is Alexandra Drecun, and I'm the president of Intersection and co-owner of Genial. And I'm excited, and thank you for being here and sharing this space with us, you amazing people. I hear from your discussions that there is a lack of science engagement, and I want to hear a bit more on that. We look at Horizon Europe, we see that we are not paying, obviously, more attention than before to science engagement. Do you get enough expertise, skills, tools, funding to communicate and engage and transfer that knowledge to the overall public? Because I think that all our discussions end up saying we lack kind of engagement that is expertise and evidence-based. So how to improve that? Thank you.
Maybe I think we need good communicators. And somebody mentioned print media. Yes, of course, it's good. There are some good journalists in good print media, but I think we need far more people who are good communicators and have access to the citizens in their countries. The thing is, it's a language thing. Not everybody speaks English. We need to reach people who don't read the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung or Scientific American. We need people who have access to citizens who may not even trust these media. And these people need access to us, to people like those sitting around this table or doing the research. I actually would like to, I've started a project in my previous role as EMBO director for journalists and communicators, not just journalists, to be given access to people. So if anybody wants to engage in that, come and see me. I really think you've hit the nail on the head. That's the most important thing. But it also has to start at school. It has to start with very young people.
Just out of curiosity, do you believe communication is here sufficient if you're living in a society which sees more the risks than the opportunities as somewhat a genetic code? We are a little bit risk averse by now in Europe and see not the opportunity first. And the second point is, isn't the communication important, but having tangible examples which the average person can experience to make complex science transparent, the most critical problem?
But we have so many tangible. I mean, you know, I just stopped writing down the list. We have it from way back when, penicillin. We have it right now within 1 year, all based on science that was done and that can be explained to people. It's the miscommunication and the fake news that are so bad. And that's where we have to start. There's no trust in us. People won't trust Emmanuelle and Uğur if they say, look what we've done. You know, you're crazy scientists and probably want to make money out of it or you know, poison the world. The trouble is very deep. It's the lack of trust in us, who only mean well. But people don't believe it.
I think Adam has another question for us. I'm sorry, I know. I would love to talk about communication with you.
It's amazing how the 45 minutes flies by. But,
it really is.
This question of communication has come up several times as well from our online audience, so it's clearly a hot topic, not just in this stage or in this room. There's also a question from the online audience. How can technology and medicine develop in our current systems in such a way as to promote healthcare justice and equity on both a global level and in local communities?
That's a hard one. That's a hard one.
Yeah, I really strongly believe that we should ask the question why. What are the challenges that is not yet accomplished? So we learned about drug development costs, we learned about failure rates, we learned about cost of goods. But to be honest, these are all technology questions, and I believe we can solve that. Yeah? And we have just to believe that this can be done. I don't see a reason why vaccines should not be available or modern cancer treatments should not be available in low-income countries. There's no reason for that. Yeah? We have just to see that as a chance, as an opportunity to engage the whole civilization. There are smart people everywhere. They are hungry. They really want to learn. Yeah? And we have to connect ourselves, like scientists do it, and transfer our knowledge Yeah? And I think we can learn when transferring our knowledge about new challenges and how to overcome that. But it's a huge, huge challenge because we need to develop an ecosystem, as Emmanuelle said. Yeah? So ecosystem means not only producing drugs, developing drugs, but also ensuring distribution, quality control, regulation, and so on. It's a huge task, but it can be done.
Let's see if there's another question from the room. Yeah, we have a question over here. Let's just wait for the microphone.
Thank you. My name is Lydia Kizimana, and I'm the CEO of the African Institute of Mathematical Science. I'm going to play the devil advocate a little bit here. So the theme today is translating science into medical application. When I'm looking at this table, where is Africa represented here? Does it mean that in Africa, we cannot translate science into medical application? What is the role of indigenous science in this? Today we are a global village, and we need to include Africa in this kind of forum. It's extremely important.
Thank you.
Yeah, I fully agree. We need to include Africa. So there is no question. Yeah? And at the end of the day, it's a combination of not only transferring science, but establishing infrastructure, which is needed. Yeah? We should not forget that even in the developed countries, we are lacking infrastructure. Yeah? We are lacking ecosystems. Yeah? So it takes time. So I think the most important is to be patient. Yeah? But stick to the vision, yeah, work on that. It might take years until it is developed, but we have to start somewhere. Yeah.
And I'll take one more question from the online audience, but we only have a couple of minutes, so quick answers, please. And another question about education. If you could change one thing in the curriculum of general education, something that everyone had to learn about, to perhaps help tackle the problems we've been talking about, what would that one thing be?
It can't be facts, can it? Teaching facts is not the point. It's, in this context, understanding the scientific method. I think that's the important thing. Mm-hmm. You know, understanding the way science functions and is done. And that's fundamentally different from just making up stuff.
And the ability to discriminate science from pseudoscience. Yes. And facts from alternative facts. That's the things that I would really... Yeah.
And discriminating in between hypotheses and facts to prove the point, which is usually totally missed in communication.
Okay, thank you. Do we have... Actually, we're at 45 minutes, so we should probably... unfortunately wrap up the questions from the audience there. But as a science communicator, it's been great to see so much focus on communication from our panel today. And I'll hand back to Mariette.
Thanks a lot, Adam. So I have to also agree with that, your clear passion about communication, and I would love to talk with all of you further about that. But I think it's to me to give us a quick wrap-up of our conversation. We talked today about how to translate research into medical application. We started off with some ideas around what are critical areas in the past 25 years. We heard about gene therapy, immunotherapy, gene drives, mRNA, about new systems for diagnoses, perhaps using AI, research with AI, and so on. And then we talked about how, the research part of this, a basic research part of this. We heard about Pasteur's research is neither basic nor applied. It is simply research, and we must persevere when it comes to bringing medical advances to us. We talked about funding, about the idea of cultivating more public and private partnerships, about what researchers need, which is a combination, I think, of perseverance and joy, it sounded like, and to take a systems approach to supporting the research enterprise. We talked a lot about communication, about the positive stories that we have to tell about such wonderful things, but we need to ensure that the facts are known amid all of the terrible noise and confusion of the internet. That was a quote. And the problem is, where do we start? I think we've agreed that education is a great place to do that, and perhaps even when we're young. We just ended on a point about the process of science. I have to agree, by the way. You could almost not weed out scientists better than to teach people a bunch of facts when they're small children, instead of focusing on doing mini labs in the classroom, and especially labs where the answer is not yes, potentially known, because science, of course, is experiments and potential failure, and lots of it, before you find the facts to move you forward. And the difference you mentioned between facts and hypotheses. We also talked about the complexity of people judging risk. People struggle with that a bit, and that this is a huge, let's say it's an opportunity for all of us. And we talked about how we could be more equitable in the delivery. In fact, we wound up on that, on building capacities in the world, on teaching a man to fish, and last on taking the ecosystem approach, including Africa and otherwise. So I want to thank our panelists so much and invite you all to applaud them. It was a fascinating conversation. I learned a lot. Thank you.